I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about how the Ghost Club and their own sort of questioning and exploration takes you through all these different, not only locales through LA, but also these different cultures, and how that's represented both in the imagery of the show and also in the style that you chose to tell it in.
Yeah, it's hard for me to think of exactly how to answer that concisely, but I guess that's the point. I mean, LA has gone through so much, just so many shifts. So I think it was like first it was like looking at each neighborhood, and there's a lot of neighborhoods. So it was, sort of picking those neighborhoods where um, we don't maybe typically see stuff about LA focused on those neighborhoods. I know for me, my family came like some of my family lived in Boyle Heights, which is a section that we cover in the first episode of the show. But Boyle Heights itself has gone through so many shifts of um, who's lived there, just like what immigrant communities kind of end up there. Um, so when my dad lived there as a kid, it was probably mostly Japanese Americans and Latino um, communities that were there. So I think I started there and then just tried to find what those interesting crossovers were in a lot of the other neighborhoods and just thought about how, um, like for me, there's this story that I like to center on where I think when I was first thinking of this show, and thinking about Boyle Heights, like a lot of times at the holidays, my dad would pick up tamales from this one bakery in Boyle Heights. And I asked him, like, why? Okay, so first, do you think by living in that area, like you were exposed to things that you might not have been exposed to because it's not really part of our culture, it's another culture? And he was just sort of like, "No, not really." And so I just pressed a little more and was like, "But you buy tamales during the holidays. Like tamales are definitely not Japanese. So where does that come from?" And it was just sort of like a matter of fact answer, like, "Oh yeah, well that's just what people uh who I lived around did, so we did that." And um I don't know, I guess it's just that, like, I feel like a lot of, people from LA have that same experience where, like, there's different things that their family eats or does or, like, art that they'll have in their house, and a lot of times kids are influenced by that without, like, sort of, like, directly being taught it. It's not like you were taught it's not like I was taught a lesson about, um, tamales are, like, a common dish from this thing. It was just sorta like, "Oh, my dad buys tamales. Maybe I should find out what that's about," or and then, just finding out, there's different kind of tamales because like, a lot of different Latin American cultures eat that. So I think it's sort of centered around I mean, not to be self-indulgent, but it was sort of like I have that curiosity. I feel like a lot of other peers of mine have a similar curiosity when they find out about things that aren't um, like either things that are common to them that don't seem like they're from their culture, or just like cultural things that you just didn't know about. Like I think in our sixth episode, we go to Koreatown and we talk about the Oaxacan community. And like when I first had the idea to do an episode about Koreatown, it was sort of like it's called like a moment where you're like, it's called Koreatown, but it's not Korean people living there. So sort of let's dig into what what's there, what's that, and how do those cultures coexist, and what do they know of each other and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All the different layers of that. And I think kids' curiosity and points of entry that can come into exploring different cultures, like you said, through food, through like imagery. And that's actually a really great setup if you want to join me in taking a look at an excerpt from the first episode. So if we can roll that clip, please.
Hello, Joe. I wanted you to meet my friend Zelda. So, this is my friend I told you and your parents about, Chef Joe.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too, Zelda.
I'm here to help you.
Help me?
Oh, with your ghost.
Oh, okay, cool.
Can I look around your restaurant?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Let me see what I can find out. Who are those people in that picture?
That's a picture of Van Halen. That's my favorite band.
Do you make spicy food here?
Yeah, sometimes I like to combine different flavors, but I actually lost my red chili powder. I have to buy some more.
Who gave you that?
I'm not exactly sure, it just kept showing up.
Oh, suspicious. Do you mind if I take a picture of that?
Go ahead.
I'm gonna send this to Thomas.
Who's Thomas?
They're our haunted artifact specialist.
Oh, okay.
What does this word say?
That says gyoza. It's kind of like a Japanese dumpling.
Oh, is this a Japanese restaurant?
Yeah, kind of.
My mom told me that there used to be a lot of Japanese people that lived around here.
Oh, yes. There used to be a lot of Japanese people who lived in this neighborhood.
See?
So fantastic. I don't know if anything else can whet your appetite more. Dumplings and a mystery. I can talk to you about this all day, Elizabeth, but I don't want to be selfish. So I am going to turn it over to our audience questions. I know that everyone joining us here has tons of questions for you. So
okay, thank you. So I'm dying to know, where do you draw inspiration from for the ghosts and the residents' personal stories about Los Angeles?
Sure. Our show's pretty unique in the sense that I had really early on hired a documentary producer to help me, who happens to be like a friend of uh, a friend of mine works at Pixar, and she is married to him. So I reached out to her thinking, of all people, she'll maybe be the most likely to know how to help me with this. Um, so a lot of the people and the ghosts are because of Joanne Shen, my producer, who researched and went out, sometimes just went out to the neighborhoods that we were um, thinking of working on episodes about, and would yeah, she just did what I guess documentary researchers typically do, but I like had no idea. So I was really grateful to have her help, because yeah, it was like I mean, I only know how you audition um actors, which is you reach out to a casting director and you ask them to set you up with somebody that sounds like whatever. But for this particular case, I was like, I really need people who, when they're answering my questions, like I don't want to write it out for them. I want them to be answering these things with like authenticity and like from their own experience. So yeah, and a lot of the process was definitely difficult in some ways. Like I know with our second episode, I can talk about that a little bit, like the skate episode, it was actually really hard to find skaters to be a voice, because I mean, skaters are by their nature rebellious people, I think, by the thing that they do, and just like the amount of sort of like physical effort of their like that they put into it. It requires a certain type of personality. So in some cases it was difficult to like really figure out who's going to be able to be our voice, who wants to be our voice. But yeah.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
You know, you took something that for a lot of people is a little scary, like ghosts and hauntings, and you turned it into a fun learning experience for kids and adults alike. Do you have a favorite episode or a favorite ghost that resonates more with you?
Yeah, I mean, I like them all for different reasons, so it's really hard. It's like that, you can't pick a favorite child kind of thing. I mean, maybe some people can't, but like, yeah, I think though, if I think about it, the one that's maybe where a lot of things came together that were really personal for me was episode 105, or I said 105, but that's how we were numbering them. It's the uh Bob and Nancy episode.
Yeah.
So um first of all, I think like I had always really hoped to work with Penn again, from Adventure Time, and I didn't know if it would work out, but I had thought like, oh, it'd be great if I could have like him and me co-direct an episode or him direct it, but I wasn't sure how busy he was because he's pretty busy nowadays. um, and eventually, like, it was really cool because the timing worked out and he was able to come on board for that episode. And within that episode, we talk about the Bob Baker Marionette Theater, which was personal to me because when I was little, I had a birthday party there, and it's just kind of this LA institution that has gone through a lot of struggle to keep themselves in existence, basically. Uh, so I think, and also that specific place, there's a lot of just already embedded ghost stories at that place. So I was like, well, that'll be exciting. Um, and then the other part of it, the Nancy part, my parents had told me about somebody they knew where they were like, have you ever talked to Atomic Nancy? And I mean, my first question was like, who's Atomic Nancy? Like, why is she called Atomic? And they said, well, I think you can guess why somebody might have the nickname Atomic, which is pretty accurate for her. But she's, like my parents' age now. So it's sort of like, it's really interesting to talk to somebody where, they're sort of through that rebellious phase and find out more about what, what was that all about? What was it like? And what inspired them to be that way. And I think through that I met other people who are part of sort of like the larger Japanese American community in LA. And also specifically in that episode, we talk about Japanese internment, which was, I mean, first of all, I wasn't expecting to go there in that episode, but I think it really sort of like subtly hammered this point that the effect that some of these things can have over time on community. So yeah, and then also just specifically with that one, the voice of the Walter ghost is Adam Muto, who was like my first board partner on Adventure Time, and then he eventually took over the show once Penn stepped away. And I think it's like the only time that he's agreed to do a voice for somebody. So technically he's my favorite ghost because it was like the most rare find.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
So, Rachel touched on it a little bit. This show is, about ghosts, which kids are typically afraid of. Well, even some adults, myself included. So I just wondered why you went with that theme and what you did to kind of keep it kid friendly.
Sure. So, I mean, when I was 6, I saw a ghost. I was always really afraid to go to the bathroom at night. I mean, just even without seeing ghosts, I think I thought I was going to see something or get creeped out by things really easily. And so this one night, I like saw something in the hallway, and I remember like it was just kind of like a fuzzy cloud looking thing, and I like called out to my parents, whose bedroom was sort of like you had to go through another room to get there. So I was like, can somebody help me? And then I remember hearing somebody, whether I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad, they just said, go back to bed. So I I did. I like flushed the toilet and I ran like back to my bedroom. And the next morning, my dad admitted to me that he had been to the bathroom earlier in the evening and also thought he saw a ghost. And then the timing of it was really weird because it was like my great grandmother was born on a leap year, and it was her birthday, and like that's when I saw it. And so my mom was convinced, like my whole family was convinced, like that's your great grandma. Um, so I think like it's sort of like I am scared by ghosts. They give me like a creeped out feeling. um, but like there's also like a like just something where when I think about it now, like I made this show and uh like I've been thinking about how the fact that also my parents didn't immediately tell me like I was making something up, or
Mhm.
that like I was, I'm just a little kid, what do I know, or anything like that. Like they just immediately kind of believed me, and there was a funny story out of it. um I think that that was really important to me. So I liked, sort of in retrospect, I like that I was able to make a show that appreciates a group of kids where there's these adults that are listening to them and believing them. So, and I think that's it was like the perfect thing to use, because it is something that adults are scared of. And so a lot of kids are scared of them too, honestly, but there are some kids that when they tell you a story that's like creepy, they're not actually scared for some reason. Like they just kind of say it matter of fact. Like somebody said, their kid said something like they saw somebody outside of their car, but they knew that he was dead, to their mom. And I was just like, that's that's weird, like, and a little scary. But I also totally love that. I totally love that it's just treated like another person. And in fact, I talked to another board artist who was on the show, who told me when she was in high school, she had done like a report that was talking about how um, kids don't really see them as ghosts before a certain point, because it's more like they don't understand the concept that somebody's died. It's more like kind of like how they picture imaginary friends. And I really loved that. I loved the idea that like to a kid, maybe somebody hasn't really died, like their spirit is still here.
How did you choose the cities when you decided to do each story? How did you choose the cities that you were going to do it in, and what inspired you to do it in that particular city?
I mean, like I said, I'm from LA too, and I live here, and there's so many different neighborhoods. I think like the first thing was like initially we didn't really know how many episodes we were going to be tasked with making. So that was sort of like the first challenge of like, well, how many episodes can we make? And then sort of like based on that, it was trying to figure out which which neighborhoods sort of have a good story in them. That like, I mean, one of the things was that I knew that I didn't necessarily want to do really hot button flashpoint issues. Like uh I didn't want that to sort of distract from being able to tell these gentle stories. Like I didn't want to take a stance, I guess is how it is. I just wanted to be able to like appreciate the stories and the cultures that were within each neighborhood without sort of like diving into controversy. Um, so actually, like initially, we got my friend who's this a comedian, really funny comedian named Jenny Yang, because I had thought that the best kind of writer or collaborator to start those initial ideas of like what neighborhoods we should go to would be somebody similar to like a Daily Show correspondent, where they follow the issues, they know a lot about what's socially going on, but also have ideas of like how to make that funny or charming or things like that. So we met with Jenny and we had a couple of sessions where we really just we put up as many neighborhoods as we could think of. We had, I think for me, I thought each kid should represent kind of like a different location, whether or not we actually say it. I wanted them to really look like where they're supposed to be from, if that makes sense. Um, and act like they're supposed to be from there, or talk like that. Because if you're from LA, you kind of notice that different areas of town, sometimes you just have really slight shifts in the way people talk or the way people dress and all and stuff like that. So I wanted that to be pretty authentic feeling. uh yeah, and then with putting all the neighborhoods up, I know we just sort of made this whole chart where it was the different neighborhoods, and then a lot of different note cards of like different ideas of what's going on in those neighborhoods, what are things that we can touch on. And then through that, I think Joanne really just started exploring a lot of them and trying to figure out, I think just practically what was doable. And for me, it was like, okay, which of these stories feel like they can be contained in like less than 20 minutes, and also where I don't want to depress people and bum people out. So I don't think this should be overly serious, but at the same time, like we do delve into some pretty serious stuff. But I'm really happy with sort of the way that we do it, where I feel like it's not hitting you over the head with anything, hopefully.
I'd love to know, what are some lessons that you hope both parents and kids will take from watching the show?
I think more than lessons, I think it's just sort of like just seeing these beautiful communities and families that like don't get talked about that often, or have shows made about them, that are existing in like not just LA. I mean, like every single city has so much to offer when it comes to that. And I think it just takes people being thoughtful about how do we make stories about more of that, like more of that nuance, more of the things that we know are not generic about life. I think I really hope that it's just in general like a show that parents and kids can watch together and enjoy, in a way where like we eventually have more programming that exists that's like that. Because I mean, for me, there's some animated movies that are top notch, that are cool for me to watch with my kids, but there's a lot that are, I think, hard for parents to sit through. They tend to kind of rely on very similar formulas. One thing in particular that I hope it inspires is that other shows have more kid language that sounds like kids. Because something for me as a parent, and just as you know, even before I had kids, kids can be so funny with the way that they say things, or like the things that they ask you or that they bring up. So I would just I just hope that there's more of that, like more appreciating that sort of like comedy that comes out of instinct from children. And also just, yeah, like I think I keep saying this, but just how kids can be really observant, they can be really sensitive and really smart. And sometimes they see things, I mean, I guess it's a metaphor for that too. Like sometimes they see things that adults don't, and they'll point it out. So I think it's just like creating kind of a mutual listening situation where kids listen to their parents, and like, you know, Zelda saying like, my mom said that, and then you see her mom. But likewise, like parents, you know, really taking a step back and kind of like listening to their kids also.
I personally am a massive fan of animation as a whole, and you know, just everything involving the medium and like the art of making animation. And one of my dreams is to work on an animated show. So I was wondering, what advice would you give to aspiring, you know, animators, artists, or showrunners, or anything of that sort?
The first thing I'd say is like, be your bravest self, maybe. And that just means like you're gonna run into a lot of different situations where, at least for me as a storyboard artist at the beginning, there was a lot to learn about how much animation, when you get into it as a business, is a collaborative effort. So like I'm not, I don't know how to put it, but I'm sort of two things. Like I can be outgoing, but I can also be very introverted. And I think part of my introverted personality is that like if I'm really fired up or interested in something, I can be brave and raise my hand and talk about it. But like it takes an effort. Like I think like if I'm in a classroom, like, and somebody asks a question and I know I have the answer, I would 100%, like my heart would be beating when I raised my hand. But But I guess that's it. Like, you sort of have to like build yourself up through those moments, especially with storyboards, because that's something where you're going to get a lot of feedback from directors, from everybody. I'm not sure if that's the aspect of it you want to focus on, but I think with each job there comes a different set of things that you're going to be criticized for, that people are going to look at, and they're going to, you know, try to adjust it. So that, I guess that's the first thing. Don't be afraid to kind of like make it a conversation with people, to sort of like, you know, sometimes feedback is valid and sometimes you can accept it. Other times you can also say like, I don't know if I agree with that. Other things are like, I guess just finding your voice, like finding what kinds of things you love about it. Like what are like the central things that make you happy about, you know, when you think about working in animation, like what sorts of projects make you most excited to think about working on. If you have sort of like heroes of yours in animation, like I guess just studying what did they do, things like that. And then just practically, I guess, just draw a lot. I mean, I don't know if that's as relevant now because there's not as much 2D stuff in the States anyway. But I would say that, like, for me, that's why I came into animation, because I loved drawing, I loved music, I loved film. So yeah, just finding ways to keep yourself excited about it, and I think that'll keep you going. Like at the end of the day, when you've had a hard day, it's always a really good reset to be able to kind of look at the work that you're doing on your own, and to dive into that, because that'll sort of like give you the strongest feelings of like perseverance, sort of.
When I was watching the show, the kind of the descriptive word for me that just kept popping up was gentle and sweet. And that's not necessarily what I would be expecting when I hear there's a show about children who are paranormal investigators. So I'm wondering if you had any kind of pushback during the original pitch process, and also kind of what is your elevator pitch for the show when we're encouraging people to watch who might be expecting something a little scarier?
I think I usually try to frame it as like it's supposed to feel like a documentary series about a little girl whose brother is making a documentary about her, and she loves ghosts, and they're not scary ghosts. It's just sort of like ghosts that exist like you or I exist, except people can't see them except for these kids. So they're wanting to talk to these people that aren't seen by others, and figure out how to bridge the gap between adults and these ghosts. I think that's a little longer than an elevator pitch, but
my question is, I really loved how the show looked. So how did you come up with the decision to have it instead of like just a regular animated show? You know, it's like live action plus the animation, and I really loved it. So how did you decide to do it to come with that style for the show?
Thank you. I think the like photos plus animation approach came from my previous short with Welcome to My Life. I remember after I pitched it, I wasn't 100%, not even, maybe not even 50% sure of what I wanted it to look like. I had just thought like, okay, I got past the pitch. Now they greenlit it. So now I got to figure out what it's supposed to look like for real. And I think when I was trying to figure out like what's the best way to do this so it feels like reality, or like that blend, the first thing I thought was this was a while ago at Cartoon Network, so it was like I think Instagram didn't necessarily have a lot of like apps that fit into it where you could put stickers or things like that on stuff. So I had just sort of come up with my own little workaround where I could like make the photo with a picture on it in another app and then brought it into Instagram. But I had started doing that and had a lot of fun, like just kind of embedding my characters into these environments that I was in. So I thought about that and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to do something like that. And then I just thought of all the shows that I've seen before where it's like 2D animated characters interacting in a world, and I thought maybe I should look into like CG characters, because with that it's a little bit more embedded into their environments, and you can also, like, there's sort of newer technologies now, so you this is really technical, but you can light them so that they look like they belong there. So I think I was really nervous to suggest it initially because first of all, like, CG was still relatively expensive compared to 2D animation, and yeah, I just have never done it before. So I was like, okay, like, can we try CG maybe? And I think starting with that, it was like after I accomplished the look of Welcome to My Life, once I got to City of Ghosts, it was sort of like I want to do something similar. And then I got my husband's studio, Chromosphere, involved, and they're brilliant at figuring out how to make stuff look amazing. So it's basically like my husband was like, well, what if we, had 2D characters as sort of like background characters, because with CG, because of the cost, it's hard to make a variety of characters in the background sometimes. So I was like, I don't know, maybe, like, I'm not sure how that's gonna look either, but it could be cool. And then similarly with the photos and the backgrounds, Kevin had this idea to add like flat design elements to it as stuff recedes into the distance, just sort of like how depth works when you're looking at a sunset or something. Similarly, I was like, I don't know about that, but then it looked amazing. Like, what they did looked amazing, and part of that allowed us to also get like a handheld look to it, because they came up with this compositing process that brought all of the elements together so that it looks like somebody's actually holding a camera. Yeah, and I feel really fortunate that, like, I have all these talented people around me that can make it look like it was intentional to do something amazing, but it totally was just because I usually just find people, and I try to see if they can do what I want, and then they do something even better. So
Well, as you can see, there's so much to talk about, and it's just such a sweet and compelling and lovely show, for little ones, for adults, for everyone. I just want to reiterate some of the points that you made, Elizabeth, that I think are great takeaways. Just amplifying the ideas about the importance of listening to kids and respecting their curiosity, acknowledging that good spirits come in all forms and all cultures, and finding a place for your voice. Those values are just things that come out in creative and natural ways in the show, and we're so excited to be showcasing them. The visual aspect of it is so terrific, and we're going to be delving into that more in our special Q&A event this Friday, and so we're thrilled about that. We're so grateful for your questions. They're fantastic questions and fantastic answers. So much more to think about and talk about, and we'll be doing that this coming Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, so please do join us. So we've got to wrap up, but we will make sure that a video recording is shared with you, and you can reach out to Gabby for any questions or anything that you need. So thank you, Elizabeth. We're so excited to launch the show on Friday and have this conversation. And thank you, everyone, for being here.